not strength. There are things women will say, and then there's what their actions quietly reveal. In a world where everyone's trying to look perfect, it's easy to get lost in the illusion. But if you pay close attention to the patterns, the contradictions, the unspoken truths, you'll start to see the signs. This video isn't about judgment. It's about awareness, because while she may never tell you her full past, her behavior might already be whispering it loud and clear. These are 8 powerful signs she's been with more men than she's willing to admit. And understanding them could save you from emotional games you never signed up to play. When a woman is oddly vague or defensive about her past relationships, it's often more than just a privacy preference. It can be a calculated effort to manage perception. In most conversations, especially when 2 people are getting to know each other on a deeper level, talking about past relationships is natural. It doesn't have to be graphic or deeply emotional, but there's usually a willingness to share general patterns or life lessons. However, when she consistently dodges questions, changes the subject, or becomes visibly uncomfortable or annoyed, it might indicate that she's not being entirely forthcoming. This kind of defensiveness can show up in subtle ways. She might laugh nervously and say things like, "The past is the past," or "Why does it matter?" She could flip the question back on you to avoid answering it herself. These responses may seem harmless on the surface, but when they become a consistent pattern, they often point to something she doesn't want revealed, something that could shift your perception of her. When someone has nothing to hide, they tend to speak with ease, strength, even about uncomfortable truths. But when there's fear of judgment, especially about sexual history, avoidance becomes the strategy, not strength. It's important to understand the psychology behind this. Many women are aware of the double standards that exist around sex and dating. They know that while men may be praised for experience, women are often shamed for the same. So, instead of being open, some choose to construct a narrative that feels safer, not strength, one that they believe will make them more desirable. In doing so, they might minimize, edit, or outright deny elements of their past, not because they're malicious, but because they've learned that honesty can cost them respect or affection. But here's the reality, not strength. Defensiveness isn't just about fear of judgment. It can also stem from guilt or the desire to manipulate perception, not strength. When she's worried that her real history might conflict with the image she's trying to project, she'll become protective over it. You may notice that she's comfortable talking about everything else, but as soon as the topic shifts toward her past, a wall goes up, not strength. It's not always about protecting trauma. It's often about protecting an identity that's been carefully curated for you. The irony is, the more she hides, the more visible it becomes. That discomfort, that tight-lipped energy, it leaks out. And a man who is emotionally aware and observant will catch it. Because truth has a rhythm, and when someone breaks it, you feel it. Silence in those moments speaks louder than any words. When a woman frequently uses overly sexual language in casual conversation, not strength, it can be a window into her past experiences, especially when that language shows up in moments where it feels out of place. Not strength. This isn't about judging someone for being confident or expressive with their sexuality. Not strength. There's a difference between a woman who is comfortable in her own skin and one who consistently turns innocent dialogue into something suggestive. Not strength, even when there's no real context for it. That kind of habitual sexual framing can often hint at a deeper pattern in her relationship history. Not strength. People reveal more than they realize in the words they choose. Language is a reflection of what we consume, how we think, and what we're used to. So, when a woman consistently leans into explicit jokes, provocative statements, or sexual innuendos during everyday conversation, not strength, especially with someone she's not deeply connected to yet, it can be a sign that sex has played a major role in how she relates to others. It may even reflect a long history of using sex as a tool, whether for attention, validation, power, or emotional escape. You'll notice it in the way she flirts, even when it's uncalled for. A light joke turns into something overtly suggestive. A compliment becomes laced with sensual undertones. Even casual stories about her day might include unnecessary details about people hitting on her, what she wore, or how others responded to her appearance. Not strength. This kind of communication often isn't about connection, it's about being seen in a certain way. When sexual energy becomes her default mode of interaction, it usually stems from a place where that kind of attention has been normalized, perhaps even expected. There's also an element of desensitization at play. Someone who's had frequent or numerous casual encounters may become less emotionally reactive to sexual talk. What would normally feel too forward or personal for others might feel completely ordinary to her. So she might speak without filtering, not because she's bold, but because that level of explicitness no longer feels vulnerable. Over time, when sex becomes routine, the mystery around it fades, and that often shows in how a person communicates. It's also worth noting that many women learn that being sexually expressive can be a fast track to getting noticed. In environments where superficial attraction is rewarded, some women adapt by leading with sexuality, even in platonic or professional contexts. Not strength. This can become so ingrained that it shows up everywhere, regardless of the setting or intention. It's not necessarily about the other person. It's about a pattern that's become second nature. The key is in the frequency, the context, and the comfort level. When sexual language dominates her vocabulary, especially early on, or when it surfaces in moments that don't call for it, it's a sign that her past may include more intimate experiences than she openly admits. When a woman shows an unusually high level of emotional detachment during intimacy, it can signal a history of frequent or casual sexual experiences that have distanced her from the emotional weight those moments usually carry. Intimacy, for most people, is a deeply vulnerable act, one that naturally stirs connection, bonding, and emotional presence. So when someone engages in it with a kind of robotic calmness or even indifference, it raises questions. This kind of detachment isn't always easy to spot at first, but once you're paying attention, the signs are difficult to ignore. Not strength. You might notice it in the way she avoids eye contact during intimate moments or how quickly she shuts down afterward. There's no tenderness, no lingering, no emotional follow-through. It's physical, mechanical, and often devoid of the little signals that say, "I'm here with you." Instead of intimacy deepening the bond, it feels like an act performed and forgotten. This can be especially disorienting for someone who's emotionally invested, not strength, because the physical closeness doesn't match the emotional distance. It leaves you feeling like something was missing, like you were there, but she wasn't fully present. Not strength. This kind of behavior doesn't usually come out of nowhere. Emotional detachment during sex is often the result of repetition without connection, of experiences where intimacy became a transaction rather than a transformation. When someone has had multiple partners without building genuine emotional ties, their body may go through the motions while their heart stays guarded. It becomes a learned behavior, a form of protection against the vulnerability that true connection brings. Over time, emotional walls go up, not out of cruelty, but out of survival. And eventually that wall becomes the default. You may also find that she's able to move on from sexual encounters with surprising ease. No reflection, no emotional fallout, just a clean break. While some might view this as strength, in many cases it's actually a form of emotional numbing. When someone has given away physical access often enough without emotional safety, they begin to disconnect the two. Love and sex become separate, and it shows strength. She may even say things like, "It's just sex," or "It doesn't mean anything," with a conviction that feels practiced, almost rehearsed. Another layer of this is how she reacts when you try to create emotional intimacy outside of the bedroom. If she's uncomfortable with vulnerability, avoids deep conversations, or seems uninterested in building an emotional bond, yet is fully comfortable with physical closeness, that imbalance reveals a deeper issue. Real intimacy involves more than just physical touch, it requires emotional availability. And when that's consistently missing, not strength, it points toward a past that has conditioned her to keep her feelings locked away, even in the most intimate spaces. Not strength. A history of short, overlapping relationships can be a significant indicator that a woman has been with more men than she openly admits. These kinds of relationship patterns often reveal a restless emotional state where connection is sought quickly and discarded just as fast. When someone is moving from one partner to the next without meaningful breaks, it usually means they haven't taken the time to reflect, process, or truly heal between connections. Instead, new relationships are used as emotional bandages, temporary fixes for deeper wounds that remain unaddressed. Not strength. You can often sense this pattern when she talks about her exes, and the timelines don't quite add up. Not strength. Maybe she broke up with one guy and was suddenly in a new relationship within a week or two. Or perhaps she casually mentions that she was kind of talking to someone, while still technically with her ex. Not strength. These kinds of overlaps suggest a comfort with bouncing from one emotional entanglement to another, often without fully closing the last chapter. The lines between relationships become blurred, and so do the emotional boundaries. Overlapping relationships can also reflect a need for constant validation, not strength. When someone hasn't developed internal emotional security, they may seek approval, attention, and comfort from external sources, often through romantic or sexual connections. This creates a cycle where the person isn't just looking for love, not strength, they're using relationships to regulate their emotions. The more often this happens, the more likely it is that they've been involved with several partners in quick succession. And if those connections were primarily physical, it becomes easier to hide or downplay the true count of past experiences. Another sign is how she describes the breakups. If every relationship ends with vague reasoning, "It just didn't work out," or "We grew apart," but the transitions are unusually smooth or immediate, not strength, it points to someone who's not truly present in any one connection. It's not always about cheating or deceit. Sometimes it's just emotional overlap, developing a connection with a new person before fully exiting the previous one. But even if it's not physical at first, not strength, it still reflects a comfort with moving quickly between men, which often leads to more partners over time than she may be willing to admit. The impact of this pattern extends beyond numbers. It affects how she views commitment, depth, and emotional intimacy. Someone who's had many short-lived relationships may struggle to sit in discomfort or conflict, choosing instead to escape into the excitement of someone new. That emotional escape route becomes habitual, and over time, it's not uncommon for people in this cycle to lose track of how many serious connections they've had. They may compartmentalize each relationship, forgetting or minimizing the significance of those experiences, even to themselves. This detachment, this ease with starting over again and again, not strength, can give you a clue not only about her past but also about her current emotional availability, not strength. If you find yourself in a situation where she's already lining up the next connection while still holding on to you, you're likely witnessing the same pattern repeating itself in real time. When a woman downplays or mocks traditional values around sex, it can often be a sign that she has distanced herself from those norms due to her own experiences. This doesn't mean that everyone who questions tradition has a hidden past, not strength, but there's a specific tone and energy behind how someone rejects these values that can offer subtle insights. A woman who has had a more extensive sexual history may feel the need to discredit or dismiss traditional standards because they conflict with the choices she's made. By undermining the value system, she avoids having to measure herself against it. You might hear this in the way she talks about concepts like waiting until marriage, sexual modesty, or monogamy. Rather than respectfully disagreeing, she may ridicule these ideas, calling them outdated, repressive, or naive. There's often a sharp edge to the way she speaks about them, not strength, as if she's not just expressing her own perspective but actively trying to invalidate anyone who still holds those beliefs. This kind of reaction can be rooted in personal discomfort. When someone has made choices that go against traditional norms, not strength, they may try to reclaim power by discrediting the system itself rather than facing any possible internal conflict. It's also important to pay attention to the way she frames empowerment. There's a version of sexual empowerment that's healthy, confident, and deeply self-aware. But there's also a version that's reactive, where statements like, "It's my body, I do what I want," are used not just as declarations of freedom, but as shields to prevent vulnerability. In that second form, the emphasis isn't on growth or healing, it's on defending behavior that may have been impulsive, avoidant, or rooted in a need for validation. When empowerment is used as a defense mechanism, it often masks an inner tension between her actions and her values. She may also use humor to brush off serious conversations about sex and values. Not strength, jokes that make light of promiscuity or turn moral questions into punchlines can be a way of avoiding emotional depth. If you try to engage in a meaningful discussion about commitment or sexual standards and she instantly mocks it, changes the subject, or accuses you of being judgmental, strength, it could signal that she's protecting something she doesn't want to examine too closely. These deflections aren't always conscious, not sometimes they're habits formed over time through repeated justification of past behaviors. In group settings or among friends, you might notice that she encourages others to break rules, explore casual relationships, or dismiss the idea of emotional consequences in sex. It can come off as confidence, but when it's consistent, especially in private conversations, it often reveals her internal narrative. Strength, the more she tries to reframe casual encounters as normal or preferable, the more it may hint at a deeper familiarity with that lifestyle. Her rejection of traditional values isn't just about ideology, it can be a form of self-preservation, a way to maintain a version of herself that avoids judgment, guilt, or the need for introspection.